Welcome to the Relationship Recovery Podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way.
Hello, thank you for being here. Today's episode is a bit contentious, and I most likely will receive some backlash, as I always do when I talk about this topic, but I really don't care because I think it's important, and I think that we're not talking about it enough. The reason that I know there's going to be backlash, because other than the obvious, is because I posted about this topic once on TikTok, and basically I did a skit on narcissistic co-parenting based on like an accumulation of my experience plus a bunch of my clients, and it was all melded into one. And of course, in 3 minutes, you can't go through every single possible thing that happens in one small dynamic, especially with the undertones and the covert abuse and all of that. And so it was basically like, hey, the kid's sick. Do you want to work out an arrangement? And the majority of people, I'd say, understand. I got comments like, have you talked to my ex? How did you have a conversation with them? Because it was just so on point. And then I got a lot of other people that were like, hey, you're a narcissist. So I just want to start with, I understand that this topic is quite contentious. I understand that a lot of people have a lot of different points of view. If you don't agree with my point of view, that is totally fine, and you're absolutely entitled to yours. I also want to give a very large disclaimer. This topic is very dependent on your specific situation and the state that you live in or the country you live in. I learned last week I have more listeners in the UK than the United States, which is amazing, but it's still, the laws are different, right? The laws are different everywhere, and everyone's situation is different. And even if I say something that you're like, oh my God, that would be so great, you have to clear that with a lawyer. You have to make sure that it works for your state. Okay. I also want to say that I don't talk about any of this lightly. I've been working in this field for a while. I am currently enrolled in a high conflict divorce training, which literally is half the trainings on this topic, if not the whole thing. So co-parenting with a narcissist is extremely difficult, and there is no right way, really. There's boundaries, there's suggestions, there's guidelines, there's strategy, but it is absolutely not one size fits all. I recommend that you work with a coach who is certified in this topic. If you work with somebody who's not, you'll likely be, or you could be, led down a path that doesn't actually work for you. So yeah, today's topic is co-parenting with a narcissist. And one thing I want to say before we even get started is that the meaning of co-parenting, which the courts want us to do, is short for cooperative parenting. When is the last time that you felt like your partner was cooperative? If they were, or if they are, or if they have a pattern of being sometimes but not the other times, or if they are actually really cooperative and this is great, then this podcast isn't for you. And if you're like, no, they're not, I just want to validate that you're here for a reason. You are doing the right thing. You're trying to understand the dynamics and how you can exist in them. Co-parenting, cooperative parenting requires actually cooperating. It is understanding teamwork, but narcissists don't do that. They counter-parent in a lot of cases. They tend to have this inflated sense of self-importance and lack compassion and empathy for you, the other parent. I don't like saying the mother of their children, because absolutely mothers can be a narcissist too. What I'm saying is the healthy parent. They don't see you as a human being. They don't see you as the person who's taking care of the child, likely the majority of the time. So you might find it impossible to cooperate with your narcissistic ex when it comes to parenting. If you're someone who's just like, oh my God, everything feels so complicated, it doesn't make any sense, this shouldn't feel this way, this episode is likely for you. And so I'm going to spend half the episode going over some signs and then responding to some questions that I got on this topic. Here are some common signs that you might be co-parenting with a narcissist. One, they might refuse to agree to a custody arrangement. You may notice that your court case has been dragged on forever and ever. It's usually a sign that this dynamic is present here. They might be dragging it on and likely during this time not really doing anything for the child. So they're dragging it on because they have this inflated sense of self-importance and can't feel like they, quote unquote, lose, but they're not willing to change their behavior or to be around their kid more or to show up. So it's actually really just to control you and distress you. But the sign is if this is being dragged out, it's definitely a sign of a narcissistic co-parent. Second one is that they might not also agree to arrangements that are made in court. So what that looks like is that they might have a court document signed between you two called a separation agreement or a parenting agreement for how you're planning on sharing parenting of the child, and then they don't do it. They don't show up for their time. They have their own version of what they will do. It could be that they have to pick up the child at 4 p.m. at school, and they'll say, what about if I get them at 5 at your house? Like, that's what this looks like. It's never based on the child. It's always based on them. What I often tell people is when you're in this dynamic, don't be flexible. Stick to the arrangement. Unless the flexibility is in the child's best interest because it's going to lead to more consistency and you're okay with doing it, but keep the boundaries clear. I'll unpack that in a further episode of strategies to dealing with it. But for now, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, they don't agree, what do I do? Stick the most you possible can to the arrangement. This is one that happens at the beginning, and usually does taper off in time. It can come back. And obviously, like I said, everybody's situation is different, but they might try and manipulate you and say how much they miss you. They might say it to you or in front of you. They might say it to people around you. They will constantly talk about how hard it is and that they'll do just anything to get you back. You may have laid out exactly what they need to do. You may have said, I need this and this and this, and I want to see this and this and this. And you need to start showing up for your kid like this and this and this. Or I need you to go to individual therapy. I'm not ready for couples therapy. This is what I need to see. But it will be all words and no actions. They will tell other people that they're doing everything to get you back when they're actually doing nothing. All words, it's no actions, which means it's mostly based on the image. They will also intrude on your boundaries. You might have boundaries that you set for either communication around the child or the child's routine or what you would like to see. Something that's common is, hey, one of us will handle the school arrangements. Usually the custodial parent does or the primary parent does. And so you might say, please don't email the school directly. If you have a question, you can ask me. I'll answer it. I'll forward it. I'll CC you, whatever it might be. But let's let the communication come from one person so they don't get confused. Or I'm trying to work out a scholarship here. I'm explaining our situation. Our taxes are obviously different. Like you might be in that spot. They're going to just walk right over that boundary and do what they want to do. They also will do it within your own home or in the way that they call you. I mean, there's probably 1,000 ways I can think about how they will overstep your boundaries. But if you have a boundary, if you have a guideline, it's being crossed. It's very common with a narcissist. They will also use your child to gain control of you. So sometimes that's withholding, like not letting you have your child at the time that you're supposed to have the child back or the child's supposed to return home. It could be bailing on you, which is really bailing on the kid, but you likely will have to cancel whatever you have so that you watch the kid. They might be jealous that the kid prefers you and try and create this inflated sense of self when the kid's around just to make you feel bad. Like, look, you're going to come to my house. Isn't it the best place ever? Aren't I not the best? Mommy wouldn't do any of this. Those are some signs, and there are tons more. But it leans into another sign, which is the exaggerated sense of superiority. They believe that they're better than everybody else, and they certainly believe that they're better than you. Everything that they do will be better. All of a sudden, they actually went to medical school. They didn't go to medical school, but they'll act like it. Like, so the kid is sick and has a cut, and they'll be like, oh, actually, those kind of cuts are supposed to, it's like, shut the hell up, we don't know, right? Or if it's a behavioral pattern, be like, well, in my house, It's like, okay, well, nobody gives a shit about what's happening at your house. Like, they're there for a day. Like, but this is the behavior that we're seeing. And so we need to talk about it. But they will think that the way that they do it is the best. You know, the way that they make French fries is better than anybody else in the world can make French fries. When the truth is, the same fries go in the same air fryer and they come out exactly the same. So just one way that they will push you. They'll gaslight you. They'll challenge you. They'll challenge your perception and your reality. They will rewrite the history. You'll be hearing things that have happened in 2016 that have nothing to do with today. They'll always put you down and they'll bring up events and rehash the past when it's not appropriate. I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely not the person I was when I got divorced. If I was, that would be a huge problem. I'm 100,000% not that person. So when a narcissist will say things to you about the past that happened in the past and the way you saw things in the past, usually based on the way that they handled it, you know, and the actions that they did that led you to feel a certain type of way, they're doing it to throw you off. They're not doing it because they want to heal something that happened in 2016. They're doing it because it's going to throw you off kilter, and they know that because they were married to you at one point. However, this has nothing to do with the kid. It's all about how they want to gain control of you. So if you're in that place where you're finding yourself like thinking, why does this happen now? Like, why we have so many years between that? Why have they not grown? Why have they not changed? It's because they are not going to. They don't think that they need to, which is a much larger issue. Another sign is that they will ignore rules. We've talked before that they will not have any respect for boundaries, but if you have a rule, they will not care about it, even if it's about your house. Same goes for the rules that are in the parenting agreement. If they have to get a drug test and it's in the agreement, they'll decide if they get it or not. But if you do one small thing that is separate from the agreement or ask for one small change, you either will not get a reply or you will be told that you're not following the agreement. Another sign is that they will lack empathy even towards the child. Not always, but this will come up. They will say that the child's best interest is their best interest, but that is not the case of how they operate. And they will talk behind your back and not care about the impact. I have heard absolute horror stories of kids coming home saying things to the other parent that the child remembers, but I just want you to remember that even if it's happening, it's not okay for you to get the information out of them or to sit them down and try and like get the info, because I'm sure that's what they're doing on the other side. I'm also sure I'll talk about that in another episode. So subscribe to this so you can get it when it comes out. But even if your child is going through an interrogation when they go to the other parent's house, don't interrogate them at home or don't interrogate them during your time. That's such a deeper topic, and I will do another episode on how to support your child when they are in the middle of a narcissistic parallel parenting arrangement, because that's what this is. So those are some signs. Those are some things you can look out for. And if this feels really tough for you to be sitting like, all right, well, now that I know the signs, what the hell do I do? There are resources online. You can go read them. But also, if you need extra support, if you have questions, you can email me. I'm going to try and talk a bit more about this topic because I think it's really important. And so I'm going to move into some questions, and these questions were submitted on Instagram. Every once in a while, I'll post a Q&A and these come up. So, but before I get there, I want to start with a quote, which kind of sums up probably a lot of my answers. A narcissist will never co-parent with you. They will counter-parent. They don't care about the emotional damage that the constant drama inflicts upon the children, as long as it causes emotional trauma for you. This is very, very true for a lot of us. And remember, a lot of the times it's not about the kid. It is about controlling you. So let's get into the questions. Before I get there, I'm going to remind you of the disclaimer from the beginning of the episode. Every situation is highly specific. Your situation is specific to you. If you don't have a parenting agreement, it's still very specific to you. If you're not divorced yet, it's still very specific to you and to your state. And you can take some of the ideas that come up here of what I'm saying. You need to put this through the filter of your situation, your agreement, your lawyer. If you have a more specific question, I can do my best to answer it for you. And I encourage you to reach out to me so I can try and answer. But all of these situations are very, very, very specific to your specific situation. I can't emphasize that enough. Question 1. How do I make others understand that I'm doing the right thing by getting out? His family, his parents, his friends, anyone who doesn't know the full truth. How do I make them understand it's unhealthy to stay in this relationship? You're not going to make them understand. They're likely not going to believe what they want. They may see the truth in time, but they're going to believe what they want. And you have to focus on what's your truth and what's best for you, and think about who will support you. You have to do what's right for you and your children. And now I'm going to assume that there might be a child involved, but even though it doesn't say that, just because this was a quote unquote co-parenting Q&A, but you have to do what's right for you. Other people are not going to see it, and the narcissist will make it their job to make the other people not see it. This isn't about the perception of others. If there was one time not to care about what people think, it's now. I'm going to go to the next question. What's the best schedule when it comes to co-parenting a 7-month-old? We're doing 50-50 right now until we have a court order. Okay, so I can't exactly answer this question because I don't know the details of your case and I don't know what state that you live in, and those are going to be very specific to you. I do know that 7 months old is very young, especially if they're breastfeeding or using breast milk. I imagine that is probably more beneficial for the child to be with the mother for those reasons. Also, I'm sure the mother, if that is happening, is spending a lot of time pumping the milk for the child. But like I said, there's not enough detail for me to be able to say, because even in this, I don't know if the person who wrote in was the mother or the father. I will say that 50-50 is difficult on the child because the child can't find any consistency. I'm guessing that's probably like a week on, week off, or that's maybe even splitting between the week, but it's really challenging because the kid's going back and forth and transitioning and they lose the stability. And now this kid is young, under a year, so they will likely adapt to it. But I would look at what the norms are in your state and try to think what is best for your kid. When the child grows up, they will likely come back very, very, very dysregulated when they come back from the other person's house, specifically the narcissist house. And so as you grow up, you're going to want your kid to be more regulated, and you're going to want to think, in this situation, you want to think ahead of what will be best for the kid moving forward. What is going to be the most stable? What is going to be the most consistent? What's going to limit transitions? So I would start seeing what the norm in your state is, what typical arrangements look like, and what would be best for your child and your dynamic. The next question is, do you tell them before they're being served? If you know they won't agree or they may blow up an attack, should I let my attorney tell them or should I do it? So this is a personal preference. I personally wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't serve. I would let the attorney do it or whoever's serving them. Now that I answer that, I do think this might be different in every state as well. In the state that I live in, you can't serve the other person. It needs to be served by a neutral third party. Likely, they'll have to be served by a neutral third party, and I actually think that's best. And so it could be the police, it could be a middle person, but it really depends on where you live, and I would look this up. This is definitely one of those questions where you need to look up the rules and regulations, but I don't think you can serve them, number one. And two, definitely don't do it because you need to protect yourself. You don't need to be in that line of fire anymore. This is a boundary. Next question. What do you do if your children don't want to go or are afraid to go with a narcissistic parent? Once again, this is very specific to the state that you live in and the specifics. If this is a safety issue where they're being emotionally, mentally, verbally, or physically abused, then you need to start documenting that and intervene legally. Every state is different. Every case is different. Every arrangement is different. And so if it is abuse happening, you need to protect your kid. That's what you need to do. If the children just don't want to go to the other parent, then honestly, they still have to go. They might not feel like it. They might be tired. But if you have an agreement and there's split time, you need to follow it. The courts are going to want to see that you're following it. You can document how the child is when they come back. You can get the child into therapy so that they have support, like some support around the emotions that are coming up for them. When the children reach a certain age, they likely will have a preference. This question didn't tell me how old the children are, but it usually depends on the state, but it's usually like 12 and up. But like I said, this is extremely state dependent. So if the child is really expressing a preference, you probably could go to court, express the children's preference, and see if you can just edit the order. Courts are going to want to see that the children are still seeing the other parent, but doesn't mean that it can't be edited. If they're younger than that, then I would document abuse if you feel like that's what's going on. And if the child doesn't repeatedly want to go, you can support their reality and try and validate them. Try and understand what's happening. Try and help them unpack it. Not in an interrogating way, but like, what's going on? What can I do to help you? What would make you feel more comfortable? You want to bring more items from this home to that home? Like, do you need something there? Whatever that is. I have a client whose ex always forgets, probably purposely, to send home their kid's pillow. And the child brings the pillow back and forth. And today I said to her, like, look, just buy another pillow. Send a pillow there that's going to stay there. And it could look exactly the same, but that's how you support your kid. When my daughter goes to her dad's, if she brings a bunch of toys and she's concerned about them, I make a list. And we sit down together and do that list because she cares about her items and things like that. So we do our best to stay on top of it. And you can just support your kid in their reality. And if there's tiny ways that you can support them, do it. But if this was my kid and there was danger or there was fear or she was afraid, I would protect my child and I would try and figure out within my state and my rights what I can do to protect my child. I'd look that up. But if there is a custody arrangement, you can't just withhold custody. You can't just not send them without them knowing. That is going to turn around on you. Here's the next question. Can you help me with this current situation? I need tips and guidance on how to go about things. Yes. So in order to get support from me, you have to reach out to me at jessica@jessicanightcoaching.com or go to Emotional Abuse Coach on Instagram. Right now, I do not have an offering that is specifically for co-parenting with a narcissist, but after I finish the training that I'm in, I will offer that, which will probably be in April or starting in April, and I'll have a one-off call option, but I'd be happy to do it in between. You would just email me. We'll figure it out. I'll tell you what I need from you to move forward and we can book something and help. I'm currently trained in high conflict relationships that, such as emotionally narcissistic abuse, but in 6 weeks from now, I'll be a high conflict divorce coach, specifically for co-parenting with a narcissist. So yes, I can help. These things can be really difficult. I've been where you are, and like a lot of it doesn't make sense at the time. And I know what it feels like because I've been there. And I remember feeling like nothing makes sense because it didn't, and it doesn't. And yeah, I just have a lot of compassion for everybody in this space because I know how much people don't understand. Okay. This will be the last question that I do today, but I've said this a few times. If you have more questions, just send them in to me. DM them at Emotional Abuse Coach or email them, jessica@jessicanightcoaching.com. Last question. What do you do if your ex is making accusations against you, calling DSS, welfare checks, coaching your child, etc.? So I'm going to guess DSS that has to be Department of Social Services, I'm guessing. I'm going to guess social services, but I'm going to answer this as if it's child services. So if they're calling child services and you're fine, like everything's healthy and your kid is acting like a typical kid, then you're fine. They can make a claim, but child services' job is to investigate that one claim and then to offer support if there needs to be support. If they don't find anything, every state has a different term for this too, but it gets screened out in Massachusetts. So if they call child service and say like they suspect you of neglect and this and that, but they don't have a specific reason as to why or what they're really saying, then it does get just screened out because it's not based on any reality. If there is abuse, if there is neglect, then they're going to find that. But usually they talk to you. Usually they try and figure it out. It can be an extremely scary thing to go through, but a lot of times that they'd find nothing. Like if child services was called on me, I think I'd go into full panic, of course, but they'd find nothing. They'd find a home that's very lived in. It's me and my daughter. They tell very clearly a 5-year-old lives here from the second that you walk in. And I personally try and remember that these organizations are here to serve purpose. They're there to figure out if allegations are true, and if they're not, they close the case. Now, if that continues to happen, they're not going to continue to open cases because they're going to see that somebody is creating a smear campaign. And honestly, it sucks because it takes away from the people that have severe issues, that need these people, that need these services. But if there's nothing found, the case is often closed. This is basically like the narcissist making a smear campaign. And so what do when they make a smear campaign? We stay in integrity. We document everything. Everything. If you don't think it needs to be documented, it does. You sit down, you document everything. You put on your documentation hat and you put the drama in the trash can. Like you need to have dates. You need to have what happened. You need to have screenshots. Stop talking to the person outside of written communication. No phone calls. Don't pick up the phone. Don't call them. If they call you, tell them that you want written communication. If they call you again, say, I need to know what this is about, but I would prefer to have an email. You need paper trails. This is really important. So get that paper trail going. Start documenting. Get really freaking clear because that's going to help you in this case, but it's also going to help you in your mind. So child services calls, you're like, actually, I have a 98-page document of things like this that he's pulled together on me. Would you like to see it? That could really help. A lot of times my ex will accuse me of things and I'm just like sitting here living my whole life for my kid. I literally live my life around my kid's schedule. I've been dating someone for a year and I've slept over his house 4 times in the year because my life is my child. You could accuse me. Like even when there's this one time he was like, you need to spend more time with her. And I'm just sitting here like, wait, what? How? Do you want me to go to school with her? Like, what do I do? Right? So a lot of times, like you have to remember that this is a smear campaign. You have to remember that they're doing this to throw you off. All like just if we refer back to some of those signs, like all of this is to pull you out. Right? But it's going to fuck with you. It's going to fuck with you. But if you own your integrity, if you're documenting, if you're taking care of yourself, if you feel like you're spending time working on you, even if you don't have a lot of time for that, you just got to stay in your integrity. I know I said that will be the last question, but I actually want to touch on one final thing because I know that this podcast is leaving a lot of things open-ended, but now that I'm already almost at 40 minutes, I'm going to pause with the commitment to continue talking about this. And like I said numerous times, you can send in questions and I will answer them on future episodes. The last thing I'm going to say is that it's very common for the narcissist to coach the child against you. Don't bite the hook. Don't bite the hook. If the child comes to you and they have all these things, validate their emotions, let them vent if they need to vent. And if they're like, no, this is what happened, just say, no, honey, that's not true, but we don't need to talk about it. You're home. I love you. I'm so glad that you're home. That's what you can do. Validate them. You don't have to go down that rabbit hole. It's not healthy for the child, and you just want to be the best parent. Sometimes I think about that at this point. I don't think anyone could tell my daughter something about me that isn't true. She literally just turned 6, and I look at her and I think like, you know what? This past Wednesday, we were like in the kitchen making a cake for literally no reason at all. And I was thinking, no, not one person could sway this child. Like if someone said, your mommy's awful, she would just look at them and be like, no, she's not crazy. Like, she might not say it in that way, but like she knows me. And that is unbreakable. Nobody could break that. And so if you feel like your co-parent is trying to coach your child against you, you really got to lean into like how amazing you really are and how much you do and trust that that shines through. They're going to get older and they're going to be able to see right through a lot of this shit. But also you can sit there and you can validate them and love them and care for them and be there for them and do the little things that only you can do. There was this other moment about, I don't know, a month ago or so, and my daughter was drinking, like we were eating, we weren't drinking, sorry. And I looked at her and like she didn't have water. Like there was a water bottle on the table that was empty. So I just took my water and I just like put it in her cup and I handed it to her. And she was like, how did you know I was thirsty? I was thirsty. And like she just had this big smile on of like as if I read her mind. And I'm like, Charlotte, I didn't know that. I assumed you would be thirsty. And she was like, thank you. And it was so cute. It was just so sweet. But sometimes I kind of read her little mind. I know what she's thinking. I know the little facial expressions she makes, and she knows mine too. It's a really special gift. And I know that you have that with your kid too. You have to lean into that. She knows you. She may not appreciate, or he may not appreciate how hard you work, but they know. They know. So I hope that this was helpful. I know that there's a lot where this came from. If you have questions, you can email them at jessica@jessicaknightcoaching.com. If you need support, you can reach out to me at emotionalabusecoach.com. You can find me on Instagram at emotionalabusecoach. I understand how hard this is. I have been where you are. And if you need support, don't hesitate.